Good morning, everybody, and officially welcome to Webinar Wednesday. This is the Dairy Standard Agency webinar number 3, and we're going to be chatting today about mastitis and the quality of your milk. It's great to have all of you with us. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really do appreciate your time. Before we get stuck into a really great presentation by Dr. Chris van Dijk, our kind sponsors today are the Dairy Standard Agency, and in the back of the studio is Jacqueline Wertendahl. Thank you so much, Jackie, for the opportunity to work with you on this great project. It's been so exciting to see how well received all the topics are. This has really been a winner, so well done to you. I think this is a fantastic project. So thank you so much for being able to work with you. Today we are going to get our head around mastitis. And so we're going to be looking very much at the health of the poor cow and how this impacts on the safety of the milk. And to break it down and to give us a very, very detailed presentation is Dr. Chris van Dijk. And he's going to be taking us through all of the basics and the difficulties of mastitis. So Chris, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate you joining us. It's great to have you as part of our presentation today. I'm sure for many of you, you don't need an introduction to Dr. Chris van Dijk because he spent almost 39 years in the dairy industry. And he's made sure that in this opportunity that he's had, he's really practiced as a vet, focusing on bovine herd health. He's really worked very closely with many dairy farmers within South Africa to try and ensure that the herd is as healthy as possible, and therefore the quality of milk is the best that we can possibly get. He's also worked with pharmaceutical companies where he's been involved in a range of different roles. And so he's definitely one of those guys that we are so honored to have. And thank you so much, Chris, for taking time out to be with us today. We really do appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Linda.
I'm now going to hand over to Dr. van Dijk. So, Chris, I'm going to give you the control now as the presenter. So would you like to take it away and share your presentation with us and help us to get our heads around mastitis? Over to you.
Okay. Linda, yes, thank you and good morning. I see there's a little bit more than 50 people already on board. Yeah, it's a privilege to be here this morning, together with Food Focus, to share with you, some of the, call it the intricacies and all the strange things around mastitis or inflammation of the udder itself. The original topic was mastitis and quality of milk, what to do. It's impossible in the morning to tell everybody what to do because there's a lot that you can do. But what I would like to do is to share with you and then maybe, specifically from the Food Focus perspective, give you more perspective on food quality and safety. This is a high quality product that we drink every day. We eat cheese, we eat yogurt, all the beautiful things from dairy that we see daily. And that's all originally, coming from milk itself. So, milk, the product itself, about 300 liters of blood need to circulate through the udder to produce 1 liter of milk. So it's a system, it's a running system. It's running at high velocity, and then things can go wrong. What I would like to do is maybe just to give the, maybe everybody is not aware of where we're sitting in the world itself. If you look at our position, we're producing about 3.4 billion liters, million tons or billion liters of milk every year from about 600,000 cows, 610,000 cows. So it's the lactating cows. Then we've got about 180, 200,000 dry cows. In total, we've got about 1.2 million dairy animals in South Africa. So we're not the biggest when it comes to dairy animals. We actually only produce about 0.55. Just a little bit more than 0.5% of the total production in the world. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see, that's the colors. There's the cost of milk production. You can see at the top left there, Canada, very, very expensive, and also the northern parts of in Europe, Sweden and Denmark and those countries, very, very expensive to produce milk there. We actually down almost in the middle, to produce milk. The cheapest countries at this stage, Australia. They're on the left-hand side of South America, and then 1 or 2 countries up in Africa. But yeah, in total, as I said, 600,000 cows producing about 3.4 billion liters of milk. The average yield per cow is about 5,500 liters per year. We do have, I think, the second best producing cow in the world was actually, or is actually, from South Africa. That cow actually produced 13,000 liters, 13,000 liters in a lactation of 305 days. We're sitting with a population of about 60 million people. In our per capita, that ME is milk equivalent. Now, milk equivalent is, we use that terminology to convert, say, cheese. 1 kilogram of cheese is about 10 liters of milk, and then so for yogurt and for milk powder and so on. So, okay, the per capita consumption in South Africa about 60 kilograms per capita. The world average is 120 liters. So we've got a long way to go. We're only halfway there. But this is specifically, for all the good work coming from the consumer education program from Mokese, and then all the other people focusing on dairy. This is improving. But yeah, this afternoon, if there's no cheese in your fridge, please go and buy some cheese and support the dairy industry. I think it's important, that we take this industry to the next level. You can see, the rest of the countries there in Africa, Namibia, Botswana, they also do have a dairy industry, but it's very, very small. Zimbabwe, as an example, that's in a brownish color there. They only can produce about milk that's enough for about 50 to 60% of their requirements in Zimbabwe. So yes, there's a lot of possibilities if we look at export as an example to go up into Africa and to become the source of dairy products up into Africa. But this is just to give you a background there about Africa or the total world, where we're standing in the world. If we look at South Africa itself, South Africa, we've basically got 4 areas. We've got the Western Cape, about 30% of our milk. The Southern Cape, just over the mountain there, in Bredasdorp and those areas. And then going a little bit more to the east there, we've got the Southern Cape there. The Southern Cape, or then the Eastern Cape. Eastern Cape, it's a Tsikama area, and then up into the Cradock area. Also about 30% of our milk, and then KZN, about 25–28% of our milk. Especially in the northern parts of KZN, as you can see there, the areas around Underberg and then Kokstad and so on. And then, yeah, the rest of South Africa, the northern parts, is the 4th division, or the 4th area in South Africa. About 15–16% of our total milk coming from there. When I qualified as a vet in '82, we had about the Mpumalanga area actually produced about 60% of the total milk in the country. Now, at this stage, Mpumalanga is down to about 1 to 2%. So all the people, moved down into the pasture-based areas, and this is where we're sitting now, the biggest production of milk. This presentation is not, the topic is mastitis in dairy cows. It's not 100%. You can't extrapolate and say this is exactly the same for goats. But the terminology and the things that we use in dairy cows is also the same for dairy goats. I think there's some members of the dairy goat fraternity on board this morning, and yeah, I think it's important also that they understand, what's going on in the total industry. Now, if you look at mastitis, this is an article from the Journal of the South African Veterinary Medical Association in 1967. This is more than 50 years ago. I want to say a lot of things did change in this 50 years. A lot of things are still the same. I will show you now a more recent article that appeared also in the same journal. But you can see, in addition to the necessity to eradicate tuberculosis and brucellosis, the problem of combating inflammation of the mammary gland has long been well known. This has been a problem, since we started with the first Friesians or Holsteins came into South Africa, and the Guernseys and the Ayrshires and so on. The sentence there, to date, little has been done to achieve this realization in spite of the knowledge. That's not 100% true anymore. A lot of things did happen in the 50 years, but a lot of things still do need to happen. And this is, I would say, almost enemy number one for any dairy farmer. One need to contain this, you need to manage this, and to make sure that you do have your hands on top of this. Otherwise, it can immediately run out of control, and then we can run into problems then. In the end is, what we're looking at, and I think specifically for this talk today, when we, by food focus, the important thing is we need to produce high quality milk, high quality product, and this is what our dairy farmers, the 1,100 dairy farmers that we do have in the country, that they're doing on a daily basis. Things can go wrong, and I will share with you some of it now a little bit later. But in the end, there's also an important sentence there that was true in 1967, also true today. Healthy milk can only be produced by healthy cows, and the quality of milk for liquid consumption as well as the manufacturing purposes is dependent on what's happening, within the farm gate, the hygienic production and in the handling of farm milk. And then from there, it will naturally go into the processor, and then eventually will be on our shelves as a high quality product that I think we can consume without any hesitation, that we can get problems there. If you look at a little bit later in the same journal, as I said, in 2009, by Dr. Mammary, I think a lot of people do know Dr. Petzer. She's actually the other specialist, or the mastitis specialist in South Africa. But she, in this article, she specifically stated, in the old days we were fighting against Staph aureus. Staph aureus is not the enemy anymore, or still the enemy, but we greatly start having a move more to what we call the environmental pathogens. And there's organisms like Strep uterus, Strep disgalactia, and so on. That's actually causing more problems now these days. And also our gram negative, we get gram positive, gram negative organisms, and then we start seeing more gram negative organisms, and they're really difficult to contain and really to treat. There are situations, that's creating new opportunities for these pathogens. The milking routine, I think, if you're milking with a platform with 80 cows on the platform, going around in 6, 7, 8 minutes, that cow is finished in milking. But you're milking 3 or 4 or 5,000 cows, or like what we've got in the Tsitsikamma, 11,000 cows. Things can go wrong. On average, we clinical mastitis. In other words, I will get to clinical mastitis now. But just to mention the percentage here, we only do get about, on any farm, if clinical mastitis, in other words, we can see the little floccules, coming out there, is less than 2%. But we're sitting with a huge problem that about, on average, about 48% of animals do have subclinical mastitis. In other words, it's not subclinical, you can't see it with the naked eye, but you do have a increase in the somatic cell count. I'll get to somatic cell count just now. And then that's actually an indication, that there's something, we call it the Titanic effect, or the iceberg effect. The Titanic only saw the tip of the iceberg. So the 2% is the clinical mastitis. But below the water, there's a lot of 80–90% of the problem is below the water, actually 98%. The good thing is that about 50–60% of cows are actually normal without any problems. We're sitting also in South Africa with, and that's also very, very important. If you look at food quality and food safety and so on, we need to take this, what we're discussing today, to all levels. You can see at the left bottom a typical platform, some that we get in the Western Cape as an example. The cows will get onto the platform and then we'll go around, they milk from the back. On the right hand side at the bottom, a guy, it's a subsistence farmer, milking his one of, and he's very proud. You can see he's very proud of his one that looks like a crossbred Jersey, milking his 1 or 2 cows there. We need to convey, and the message need to get to everybody, because as you can see on the right top there, in the commercial dairy herd, samples will be taken. On the left-hand side, the people, unfortunately, they haven't got the milk can't be pasteurized. That could be a problem, if you look at food safety. And then one need to actually, the message that or the talk I'm giving today is actually going to everybody, from the subsistence farmer that's milking 1 or 2 cows, up to the communal or the small elder, and eventually to the macro dairy herd that's milking 10,000 cows. The milking routine has changed. The milking machine maintenance can be a problem. The increase in herd size is most definitely a problem. Together with that is the fourth bullet on the right bottom there, the introduction of many new cows. This is a biosecurity, how can I put it? This is biosecurity in action. You need to test your animal before you introduce it into your herd. You can, the guy can tell you, listen, there's no problems, I haven't got mastitis. You can introduce a new Strep agalactia as an example, and then, okay, your milk production is, say, 40 liters a day. Suddenly it can go down to 15 or 20 liters or 10 liters a day, just because of the introduction of one animal into your herd, and you get it will run like a veld fire and then actually spread throughout your herd. Okay, so that's on the trends itself. If you look at mastitis, there's a picture of a section through the udder of the cow. You can't see the teat canal or the teat orifice here at the bottom. I've got my little arrow there. Then you get the teat canal, and then there's another sphincter or a muscle there, that keep the milk into the in the gland itself. So the milk is produced at the top here, and then there's, as I said, there's about 300 liters of blood running through this udder for every 1 liter of milk that's produced. This mastitis is basically, as I've got at the bottom there, is an infectious condition resulting in an inflammatory reaction. So you get an infection. I'll show you another picture, where I would like to describe it a little bit in more detail. But it's usually, you can get a teat canal infection, and in most cases, okay, the organism will come in. It's usually a contagious organism or an organism from the environment. So contagious mastitis is usually caused by the hands of the milkers or from the milk machine itself, and it will be introduced into the teat canal. Usually, immediately you will get a reaction there, an inflammatory reaction, and white blood cells will start flowing into that area. That's part of what we call the somatic cell count. But then, if it can actually penetrate up into the udder, Staph aureus, as an example, will go into the alveoli where the milk is formed. This is the teat cistern, but then the alveoli is at the top there. It will go in there. It will be encapsulated, so it can go. It can actually hide from the rest of the body. So the inflammatory reaction can't do what it is supposed to do. And then also the antibiotics that you're injecting or that you're putting in through the teat canal can't reach that organism. We'll get a little bit later. We'll get to treatment itself. Okay, so usually, that's a sign that there's a problem. If the udder is red, if it's hot, if it's painful, usually if you touch a udder like that, the cow will start kicking at you, or you can see it's painful. It will be swollen, and then also the loss of function. So the milk, that's usually a good indication. If it's red, hot, painful, swollen, and loss of function, that you do have a problem in that udder itself, and that there's an infection in that udder. Also, if we do have a huge focus on animal welfare. I think, as I said, a happy animal it can produce milk. A happy animal is a healthy animal, and in the end, this isn't a welfare issue. We need to address this, and we need to address it immediately if there's a cow with other infection. Otherwise, we're not doing what we need to do when it comes to animal welfare. But also, what I said there, it could be a food safety problem. But also, very, very clearly, it's an economic problem. I will share with you some of the losses that people can incur, or that the dairy farmer can incur when it comes to mastitis. What I would like to is another thing, it's not an epidemic like what we've got now with COVID or a pandemic, when it's the whole world through. This is endemic. It's endemic, and it's in most herds. We do have organisms circulating there. It will flare up, if there's a suppression of the immune system by BVD or some of the herpes viruses, one of the two, or maybe a nutritional problem, then mastitis can become a problem. If you've got a problem with your vacuum, the vacuum on the clusters is not what it's supposed to be. You get a damage to the teat canal, and eventually it can end up introducing an organism, and you sit with a problem. But you see it frequently, and it's a very, very costly disease. I will get to the technical characteristics. There is an effect on on the butterfat and the protein and the potassium and the sodium and so on. I will share that with you just now. Okay, so in the end, it can have an effect on the intrinsic quality of the milk itself. Now, I can't go through all of these 6, 9, 10, 11 bullets here. I would like to touch on this, the consequences of mastitis. First of all, the production loss. You can lose, anything between 1% up to 100% of milk can be lost. If you're sitting with a blue udder with E. coli mastitis, that's eventually going to end up in a dead cow. But usually your milk production will be, today it will be 20 liters or 25 liters. Tomorrow it can be 0 when you sit with a E. coli mastitis. So production losses, and again, if you look at the clinical mastitis, I'll get to the numbers now, just now. Clinical mastitis, substantial loss, but the biggest losses are from the subclinical mastitis. In South Africa, if you calculate, we've looked at together with Statbook the other day, they're doing milk recording, and we've looked at the numbers. If you extrapolate that and take it into the country, we're losing more than R1 billion just because of one with 9 zeros, just because of subclinical mastitis. And therefore, it's you know, as I said, it's almost enemy number one on any dairy farm. So milk production, sorry, milk production losses could be a problem. Drugs, if you look at drugs, you know, we want to go green. We can't go without any drugs. We need to use these drugs with responsibility. If I'm talking about drugs, as antibiotics, anti-inflammatories, that we also, you know, it's painful, so we give some anti-inflammatory, pain-killing type of products. But yeah, if you introduce, like on the picture on the right-hand side there, if you introduce a tube of antibiotic there, you must know what you're busy doing. And I will get to the the drug itself. You know, when you look at the drug, we've got different acts in the country. We've got Act 36, Act 101. I don't think there's any place to use any extra label or homebrew type of products. You know, the other day that they're putting, I can't mention the trade name here, but it's actually a disinfectant, you know, that you use when you fall from a bicycle and something like that, you know, just to clean the wound. But some people are still in these modern days in 2021 still use that, you know, to treat an animal, and that's I think it's against the law. It's against anything, animal welfare, everything there. So and then yeah, we're looking at lactating cow drugs that you can use in a lactating cow. Usually it's almost I don't think it's, you know, and in most cases, certain organisms, you're wasting your time, you're wasting your money when you try and treat an animal during the lactation period. The best time to treat that animal, especially Staph aureus as an example, to treat it during the dry period, because then you can go in with much higher antibiotics, and then you don't have a problem with inhibitory substances or antibiotics in the milk itself. So that's on drugs itself. If you look at the discarded milk, you know, there's a withdrawal period when you use a product. It's anything between 1 day, 2 days, up to 5 days. So you can imagine if that cow is a 30-litre cow, 5 liters is 100, or 5 days is 150 liters times, say, R5, just to make the calculation. It's a lot of money that you're pouring down the drain. Just because of this, you need to treat this animal, and now you need to discard this. But also, as I said at the bottom on the right-hand side, is also the income over feed cost. It's not, it's expensive to feed an animal. A lactating cow, the income over feed cost is relatively high. And then one need to, and then if you're still feeding this and you're sitting with a problem in the udder itself, your losses will be even more, you know, to look at that. Then veterinary services. Veterinary services, this is essential. I think you should have a veterinarian on board. He should be involved there. Your next door neighbor maybe can give you some examples of what to do and what not to do. But I think the best person, and is a highly qualified person, that would be the veterinarian. Yes, if it's a nutritionally related problem, say you've got a you know, your micro minerals as an example. It's not a micro mineral, but calcium and phosphorus as an example. That's macro minerals. But selenium, if you've got a selenium deficiency, your nutritionist need to get on board, and he need to support you in that to make sure that you can overcome that problem. Okay, and then labor, you know, it's labor. You need to put people on board there and say, okay, you need to treat this animal. And then eventually we get to the product quality. You can see, you know, that's what we would like to see on the table or in your fridge. And eventually that photo on the right top there. But you can see there, if you read it there, you know, I can read some of it. Normal butterfat is about 3.5, 3.6, up to about 4.2% butterfat. But it will go down. You see, this is work from Mustafa 2003. Just an example, what happens to the butterfat from 3.5 to 3.2. The lactose will go down from 4.9 to 4.4. Total protein down 361, 356. The total casein will go down from 2.8 to 2.3. the whey protein will go up, you know, so that's one of the changes that you do get with mastitis, from 0.8 to 1.3. So there is an increase. The serum albumin, that's part of the inflammatory reaction, 0.02 to 0.07. Lactoferrin is one of the substances that's excreted or is actually produced when you get an inflammatory reaction. You can see it's going up from 0.02 to 0.1. Lactoferrin, unfortunately, could be sometimes a little bit of a problem, especially if you've got a seasonal calving pattern, because cows, normal cows, normally we start milking a cow at about 4 or 5 days after lactation. You know, when the colostrum is gone and so on, we start milking her. That milk will go into the tank. But we do have high levels of lactoferrin, and that lactoferrin, unfortunately, can give us false negative with some of the tests for antibiotics or inhibitory substances on the market. So be aware of that. But you know, it's not a normal cow. In a mastitis cow, it will go up from 0.02 to 0.1. And then immunoglobulins, you know, immunoglobulins, there's different of its day. Basically, our antibodies will go up from 0.1 to 0.6. And then the strange thing that's happening, you know, with all the minerals, you can actually, if you want to do the organoleptic test, and then I will show you some of the diagnostic material and things that's available that can measure the sodium and the chloride. You can see there's 0.06 up to 0.1, 0.09 to 0.4 to 147. So you can actually get that salty taste in the milk, you know, if there's and sometimes even before you start seeing the floccules and start seeing redness and you know, hot udder and so on. The potassium also up, and then, you know, on the other side, what we want in milk is calcium. That's one of the things that you know, if you drink milk, it's actually your source of calcium, a big source of your calcium, but it will be reduced from 0.12 to 0.04. Okay, so that's all the changes that we do get in the product quality itself. If you look at the materials and the investments, you need to invest. You know, it's money that you need to spend. This is a teat spray. You need to have that on board. It's in goats also. You know, pre-milking, post-milking, you need to spray the teat, because unfortunately, you know, after milking, that teat orifice will remain open, and then when that cow is going to lie down, then she can actually pick up organisms from the environment, like Strep Discalactia, Strep uberis, E. coli, and so on. She can pick it up. So what we do with this teat spray or the teat dip that you put there is to seal that off and to make sure that you don't get infection going in from the canal. If you look at the diagnostics itself, you know, that I think they call it a Draminsky meter there at the top. What you do is you'll put your milk into that, and then you will see the conductivity here. That's, you know, that's an indication if the salt is higher than normal, there's sodium and the potassium and the chlorine. Then what you will get is that you will get a reading there. I think it actually shows you a color there. Then you will know that there's a problem there. At the bottom, you know, the vet and the farmer is busy discussing the California mastitis test with those little cups. This is also a very, very good cow side test, you know, that you can use immediately. You can see that there's a problem, and you can then immediately, together with your veterinarian, start deciding what you want to do with that animal. Milk recording also plays a very, very important role. Stud book, you know, as an example, they do milk recording, and they report that then, you know, that's unfortunately only every 4 to 6 weeks that you do get that result. But you can then start seeing a trend in your herd itself, and that will give you you know, an idea that there's a problem or there's no problem, or that everything is under control. It will give you your somatic cell count per cow. The somatic cell count per cow, and we will get to it just now, should not be more than 200,000 cells per milliliter. If it's more than 200,000 cells per milliliter, you know, that it could be an indication that there's already a inflammation there, and they need to immediately to jump in and make sure that you identify the organism and then get rid of it. Mastitis cows can, because their immune system is down, they're busy fighting with this problem and the other. This is just an example of a uterus, you know, with a uterine infection. This is, you know, what you see is from a dead cow being taken out of the cow, but you can see the pus in the uterus there. Okay, let's go to something a little bit more acceptable to the eye. The last thing is culling, excessive culling. You know, the average age in South Africa is about 3.2, 3.5 lactations per cow. Then that cow is out. If you look at the average in countries like the Netherlands, I looked at it the other day, that's about 6 to 8 lactations per cow. So mastitis could have a very, very erosive effect on your herd itself. And cows are prematurely culled because of mastitis. There's a direct cost of rearing. I discussed it the other day with a farmer, you know, just to rear an animal from calving up to from birth, when it can calve for the first time at about 23, 24 months, that's 10, 15,000 rand, you know, just to raise that animal. So you can think for yourself, you know, the break even is only in lactation at the end of lactation 1, or maybe in lactation 2. So if you only keep that animal for 2.5 lactations, you're not really going to make money out of that cow. So it's very, very important, you know, for on the one side for the money, but also for the value of that animal. Maybe it's a highly genetic bred animal, but you know, it could be the highest genetic bred animal. She can get mastitis, and we need to prevent that. Okay, so that's on that. I mentioned the word somatic cells now several times, and if you look at the right-hand side there, Linda, I just look at the time here, so okay, I'm still according to the timelines. If you look at somatic cell counts and somatic cell count and mastitis, you know, this is a cow-side test that's available to us, something that we can use to see that there's a problem. As I said, you know, 90% of your cows of the herd should be below 200,000 cells per milliliter. That sounds a lot, you know, if you start counting it and if you start seeing it under the microscope. But the mastitis cow can easily go up to a million cells per milliliter. But then you will see, you know, then it starts forming pus and so on. At the bottom, maybe it's a little bit small on your screen, but this is the alveoli, you know, the small little from the teat canal up into the teat cistern, eventually up into the alveoli. There's millions of these little alveoli, and that 300 liters of blood will be circulating in the blood vessels there around this, and then you get calcium and all the other substances that eventually forms the high quality product milk is then secreted from the blood, and it will go into this wonderful organ here, you know, this little alveoli. There's my arrow now. There's my arrow. Will go into the alveoli, and that's where milk is then formed. From here, it will be pushed, you know, all the alveoli, it will be pushed into the teat cistern, and then from the teat cistern, it will then go into the, when a cow is coming into the dairy parlor, as an example, when she starts hearing the sounds of the milk machine and so on, the oxytocin is stimulated up in the brain, and that's when why you sometimes see, you know, when the cow is standing in front of the parlor, when you start seeing milk that's flowing out of the udder. But it's important, you know, that you do get that stimulation. You can't just go into, and one reason for getting mastitis and over milking, when that cow is coming in, you chase it into the parlor, just put the clusters on, and you start milking. Because in the beginning, there's no milk in the teat canal, and that's then, first of all, causing damage to the teat orifice, or the opening at the bottom of the teeth, and eventually also the lining of the mucus lining on the inside of the teat canal, and that's a place where bacteria will then come in. So you can see in the next picture on the right hand side. So this is the normal the normal teat canal, the normal alveoli, and then when you start getting problems there, you can see, you know, there's inflammation there. Inflammation also in the blood vessels. You start the first reaction of the body send white blood cells there. So somatic cells are leukocytes or white blood cells. You get a large range of different white blood cells, but it's not only leukocytes, but it's also cells from the body itself. So you start getting a sloughing of the cells, you know, of the epithelium of the inside there. It's usually only one cell there, but you also get a damage there. And those damaged cells eventually end up in the milk as somatic cells. So yeah, the somatic cells, maybe before I go to the top left there to discuss that, somatic cells between 0 and 250,000 cells per milliliter, your percentage loss in milk due to an elevated somatic cell count is 0. But you can see there, you know, if it's going to more than 1 million there, so it's 1,000 plus another 3 zeros, to 1 million cells per milliliter, you can lose up to 25% per lactation from that cow, or in that period from that cow. But sometimes it can continue. You know, if you keep on running your animals between 400 and 700,000 per milliliter for the total lactation, you can lose up to 10%. And if it's a 6,000 liter cow at 600 liters times 100 cows times 5 rand a liter, eventually is a lot of money. What we said is, and this is coming from the literature, you know, we're losing about 375 kilograms or liter per clinical case. So it's about 400 liters of milk that can be lost with one clinical case. And that's not what we would like to see. I just did some calculations. This is still at the old number here at 450 per kilogram. But even more so, you know, if the milk price is higher, the milk price is busy increasing. 1,600 rand is a number here, but it can go up to about 2,000 rand per animal. And it eventually, you know, this is why I said it's an endemic disease, but this is a very costly disease. Now, when you get to the, so keep your questions on the somatic cell counts. I can't go into a lot of detail here, but I would like to, you know, in this 45 minutes I've got, would like to share with you all, you know, whatever I can share, and then just for you to start thinking about, you know, what's happening at the bottom of that cow in that machine that we've got there. It's called the udder itself. Okay, so the end user. So we've talked about what's happening at farm level. At farm level, it's if you look at the epidemiology of mastitis, epidemiology is basically all the things, all the factors that can play a role. There's cow factors, the immune system of the cow, the feeding of the cow, the breeding of the cow. A lot of things can go wrong there. Then there's also environmental factors, and then there's pathogens. You know, we've got some emerging pathogens. We do have, unfortunately, in South Africa with HIV, that's also a problem in South Africa. Unfortunately, some of the HIV people can be, or they could be carriers of Staph aureus, of the human Staph aureus. And we did start picking up some of the human Staph aureus in cow's milk. So that's all the things that we would like to look at. But in the end, you know, if we can go to the positive side, what we would like to have is wholesome milk, highest quality and safe for the end user. And I can, you know, I would like to make a statement here again. If you're buying from any shop, let me mention the names, Pick and Pay, Checkers, or wherever you buy, Woolworths, wherever you buy your milk, that is wholesome milk. It's from the highest quality. It's safe for use for the end user. So, you know, what I mentioned now is things that can go wrong at that farm level, but we do have our checks and balances in place to make sure that this doesn't end up on the shelf itself. So if you've got that bottle of milk and it's coming from one of the shops that I mentioned and wherever, you can be 100% sure that that milk is a product that you can drink. It's free from any inhibitory substances. It's free from antibiotics. It's free from soaps and detergents. And then also, you know, the question that we do get from time to time, are there any hormones in the milk? We're testing for it and we're making sure that it's not in there. If you look at the inhibitory substances in milk itself, you know, there's a lot of things. And this is another presentation for another day, maybe, Linda, as the 10-point quality control program. And then I would like to take us, you know, the listeners quickly through this. But I think, you know, to put things in place, there's a lot of things. And as I said, you know, we're looking at what's on the udder of the cow. This is, you know, this is where the milk is coming from. And we must make sure with this 10-point quality control program that things are in place. I think, first of all, you should have, you know, whether it's a goat farmer or a dairy farmer, you can't do this on your own. You should have the number 2 there, the veterinarian client-patient relationship, especially if you're using antibiotics on your farm. The veterinarian needs to be involved. It's illegal, you know, to use an Act 101 product on farm. You know, maybe you got it from a script from your cousin that's in England, and you're using that script to obtain antibiotics. It's against the law. That veterinarian client-patient relationship must be there, and then you need to have a proper herd health program in place. Herd health is not just reproduction, you know, to say a cow is pregnant or not pregnant. It's looking at heifer raising. It's looking at vaccination or immunization programs. It's looking at nutrition, but also very, very important is to look at other health itself. Other health or preventing mastitis is a very, very important part of the total program there. So if you haven't got a veterinarian on board, I think it's time maybe to consider, yes, veterinarians, anything is, as one guy said one day, his price is what you pay, value is what you get. Yes, it's costly to invest in a veterinarian, but I think this is going to be one of your better investments, if you look at the return on investment on what you can get back from that. So herd health programs must be in place. You need to have a veterinarian on board. And then when you do use products, you can only use, as I said, don't use home concoctions and things what the next door neighbor said, this is working for mastitis. If a product is not registered either under Act 36 of 1947 or under Act 101 of 1965, you are not allowed to use that product to treat mastitis. Please, this is against the law, don't use it and don't do it. And don't use it extra label. If somebody's, say it's an injectable product, and then somebody said, yes, I use that for mastitis. If it's not registered to be used for mastitis, you can't use this on this animal. And then we do get to extra label products. You can get that, and it's available. But you can only use it by and under control of your veterinarian. Correct labeling, number 4, very important. All products should be labeled. When you buy a product at the co-op, Act 36 product that you can buy over the counter, it will be labeled. It will give you the instructions. It will give you the number 6 there, the administration. How do you administer this? And then very, very important to look and see what is the withdrawal period. If the withdrawal period is 3 days or 5 days, you can't start milking this cow at 3 days and think you're going to dilute the milk, and because of the dilution, they're not going to pick it up when they test the milk. I'll get to the test for the residues just now. So it's important, the correct labeling. If it's Act 101 product, every product like what we get at the chemist, when you go to the chemist, they will not give you Schedule 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 product. You're not allowed to have that product without the correct labeling on your farm. And then also the storage of product. Put this behind behind a locked door. This product should not be around there contaminating the environment, and it should not be available to lay persons to use this product. I once had a huge problem in the Western Cape where they used a dry cow product. A dry cow product has got a withdrawal period of about 3 weeks. So they used the dry cow product in lactating cows, and they immediately picked it up at the milk buyer, and they couldn't use that product there, or the milk itself. So please don't get into that. The administration, as I said, when it's an intra-mammary product, do it intra-mammary. I showed you the picture in the beginning. Rub the teat orifice, clean it with spirits or disinfectant, and then make sure that you administer it correctly according to what they say. Maybe go back and read or keep the package insert, but read it from time to time and make sure that you administer it, and also train your people that's doing the work there. The records, very, very important, for the withdrawal period. Do have either put paint on the animal so this animal has been treated with antibiotic, and then milk that cow last. If you've got a herringbone where the animals can enter on the left or on the right hand side, make sure that you actually do mark it on both sides, or put a band around the leg, or do something. These days with the modern computer systems, you will be alerted that this cow is under antibiotic treatment, and make sure that milk is not pumped into the bulk tank. Then the testing for residues. Now we do now these days get cow side test that's available where you can do these tests at farm level. Just make sure that when you use this test for the residues, most of the residue test that's available in the country is only for bulk tank milk. You can't use it on individual cows, so you can get a false positive by using that on an individual cow. So in the bulk tank, you use it on the bulk tank. If you're worried about this cow and you think there's still some residues there, rather milk last, and then don't pump that milk into the bulk tank. I'm not going to go into detail there, but if you do have questions around the testing and the residues, there's very, very good cow-side tests available. A sample will be taken every time when they come and collect the milk, and that will be retested, or it will be tested before that milk is pumped from the bulk tank or from the tanker into the bulk tanks at the processor. It will be tested. If you contaminated that 30,000 liters, then you will be held liable for that, for 30,000 liters of milk that they need to chuck down the drain. So we don't want that. Please be aware of this. Usually, when there's antibiotics in the milk or any inhibitory substance in the milk, it's usually a human error. So please be very careful here and do what you need to do and make sure that we don't get the problem there. We need to involve all role players. I think that the milk buyer is a very important role player here. You as the dairy farmer, whether it's goat or dairy cows, very, very important to play a very important role there, but also to train all the other people, that's in the parlor about the effect when you get antibiotics or inhibitory substances in the milk. In the beginning, when they do these tests for the residues, they can actually only say that you do have inhibitory substances, or in Afrikaans, a remstof in your milk. So we've got a remstof or an inhibitory substance there, but then they need to test it. These days, they can test for your sulfametazines, the tetracyclines, and the penicillins. But we've together with Dairy Standards, actually did the work now recently. We tested for 120 other inhibitory substances, and we unfortunately did find some of the products there. And then this is going to become, in future, we would be able to test for all of this. So I don't think because people won't test for it, they can't see what's in there. As they say, Big Brother is watching you, and let's be careful on that. And then to review the program on a yearly basis. So Linda, that's from my side. It's a lot of things, and I see we're already 10 minutes away from the end of this program. But yeah, I don't know if there's any questions. I'll be happy to take any questions now, Linda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. van Dijk. Yes, there are definitely a number of questions. Thank you so much. It's actually a lot more complicated than, I think we give it credit for. So I think thank you so much for a very comprehensive presentation. I definitely learned a lot. If you can leave the presentation just there, and if you wouldn't mind switching on your camera, because then at least I can ask you some questions and we can see you again.
Yeah, just try to find, where do I find?
You've been so focused on the presentation.
No.
I'll send you a request. Yeah, no problem.
Can you?
Easier.
So there we go.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so if I understood correctly, this is one of the questions from somebody who joined a little bit late, but maybe you can just also give us a sort of a clear answer or a recap answer. The cause of mastitis seems to be, from what I understood from your slide, there's obviously a group of bacteria that can cause this infection in a cow, and that the bacteria could come from a number of different places, a number of different infection points within the milking sheet. Am I correct? There isn't a one size fits all here. It could be E. coli, it could be a staph, there could be a number of different bacteria that actually cause the same infection.
Yeah, that's correct, Linda. It's, if you want to divide it and to make it easy understandable, is you get two forms of mastitis, is what we call contagious mastitis. So that's your contagious organisms like Staph aureus and Staph agalactia as an example. As I said, the cluster, the teat cluster or the hands of the milker or wherever could be the source of the infection. So maybe you touch your face and you pick up, now these days with sanitation and so on, I think we've learned a lot, and I think it's actually, not that I'm saying COVID was a good thing, but it teaches us a lot about sanitation, and that's very, very important. Your hands, when you milk, I think it's important to wear gloves there, to disinfect your hands, to make sure, when you touch your face, as an example, you can pick up a Staph aureus and you can introduce it into the teat canal itself, or to the udder, and then eventually it will be introduced into the teat canal. So it's infectious organisms. contagious mastitis, and then on the other hand, as we're getting the environmental organisms. So that's all organisms that's around in the environment. So yes, don't have a camp where the cows need to lie down in mud. You know, mud is a good area where especially E. coli can be accumulated. E. coli is all over. It's a organism that you can, when you go and do a sample anyway, even now today, you know, even in your house, when you can pick up E. coli anywhere. Unfortunately, you know, E. coli is not it's not virulent. It can't cause disease. All the E. coli, we've got normal E. coli also in our intestines and so on. So it's contagious mastitis and then environmental mastitis, and then the organisms to subdivide it into gram positive and gram negative. But most of them are bacteria. There's no viruses that can cause mastitis. Yes, lumpy skin disease can cause the lumps in the udder itself, but you know, so there will be an infection in the udder. But as on its own, lumpy skin disease or any of the viruses can't really cause mastitis as such.
Mastitis, yeah. So I think what I got out of that, you know, and in terms of the slide that you showed us, is that because it can come from a number of areas, you know, the prerequisite programs that we have on the farm, the good agricultural practices that we need to have in place within the herd are absolutely critical. So, you know, you mentioned worker hygiene, you mentioned the condition of the camp, you know, the mud, the standing water. So those basic hygiene requirements are absolutely critical for herd health, for the quality of our milk, and obviously also from an economic perspective, as you explained.
Yes, most definitely. Yeah, we can't get around it. It's essential. You need to have those things in place. Your environment, as I said, if you look at mastitis, the host, the cow, can play a role. The pathogens that we discussed now can play a role, but most definitely to close this triangle of epidemiology is the environment, and that's the milk machine, the area where the cows are kept and so on. Now these days, you know, I think, and then people will make an issue about these what we call the freestall barns. You know, those cows are less exposed to mastitis compared to a cow that's outside. You know, walking around in the Western Cape in the winter time in mud that's a meter deep.
Yes,
you know, so those cows are much happier. And then, you know, when you look at the welfare of those animals and mastitis, the possibility of mastitis is highly reduced by an environment like that.
Excellent. And yeah, I think, Tato, you asking questions with regards to, you know, what should we be looking for on a dairy farm? Well, I think that's where the DSA, you know, farm audit comes into place. Many of the things that, you know, Dr. Chris mentioned, that good farming protocol that he mentioned, those I think are all the basis for what we should be looking at on a, you know, a farm audit. Now, this obviously has a very serious health effect on the cow, as you mentioned, but you also mentioned that the next, you know, unfortunately, we may have to cull some of the cows as a result of this. So we have a very interesting question here from Philip, who's saying he's previously worked in the beef slaughter industry. And so now you take a dairy cow that is now unfortunately no longer able to produce milk. She's sick as a result of the mastitis. She has to be culled. What is the impact on the quality of the meat, or, you know, and bringing this cow with mastitis into an abattoir environment, Chris?
Linda, yeah, it's a good question. Okay, what you do need to do is, you know, usually the udder will be dissected from the cow. So the udder itself won't go into the what we call the red meat chain. You know, this is seen as offal, and it will be treated as offal. That cow, when it has got antibiotic in her, you're not allowed to slaughter an animal, you know, so if the withdrawal period is 5 days and you've been treating this cow now for 3 days, and then you send her on to the abattoir at day 5, that animal can't be slaughtered because then there's antibiotics, and then that even at the abattoir they can pick up those residues there. Then you're going to pay for the slaughter fee, and also you're not going to get anything for the meat. So if possible, you know, if you did treat an animal and it's the 3rd or the 4th time with mastitis and you want to send it to the abattoir, make sure that your withdrawal period is gone and that animal is without any circulating antibiotic. But in the end, is, you know, the rest of usually if it's under control, the rest of the meat is still you can still use it, except if it's a E. coli mastitis, you know, then that's a complete. complete mess
Okay.
almost. I can use that word.
Okay, so then actually that meat is not suitable for human consumption. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
So that's quite interesting. I mean, when it comes to ante-mortem inspection, looking for signs of mastitis is then quite important. It's an important control at abattoir level then.
Yeah, I think it's, the veterinarian, or if it's not an A-grade abattoir, the ante-mortem inspection, very, very important part of, if that cow is lying there and she's got a blue udder caused by E. coli, she will end up in the whole animal will be condemned. But you can also, post-mortem, after slaughter,
Yes.
by the meat inspector will pick it up and see this is a cow with high fever, and, the meat quality, immediately you can see that there's a problem in that cow. So again, we've got the checks and balances in place that meat can't end up in the food chain.
In the food chain, yeah. So important question. Thanks, Philip, for that. Now, if we take the fact that because of the milk now has a high somatic cell count, but we're going to homogenize, we're going to pasteurize that milk. I mean, how does that not purify the milk? I mean, does it, going into the food chain, is it that much of an issue? Can we not take care of it further downstream?
Just repeat the question. I'm not 100% with you, Linda. Just repeat.
Okay, so if we have milk that has a high somatic cell count, I mean, it obviously gives us an indication that there may be mastitis in the cow. But if we're going to take that milk and pasteurize it, will that not solve the problem as far as human consumption is concerned? Will that not clean the milk, so to speak?
Yeah, that will not. That will kill all the bacteria, whatever bacteria is there. And that's one reason why we pasteurize the milk. To get rid of the possible disease-causing organisms. You don't want to ingest a E. coli or a Shigella or Staph aureus or whatever. So we kill the organism. It's dead then. But the somatic cell count, people are also paid for, they not only paid for volume, but they also paid for the quality of the milk. So the higher the somatic cell count, and this is why farmers on a day-to-day basis fight against mastitis and make sure that they do produce high quality product. We sketch the dark side of the picture here now, but I can what's happening on a day-to-day basis out there on the farms. The dairy farmers are doing their utmost best to make sure that this animal is producing milk, high quality milk, somatic cell count less than 200,000. Many of our farmers do operate below 200,000, but then you do get one or two animals. You've got a flare up of mastitis, and then they're treated accordingly. But by pasteurization, and that's what I said in that picture in the beginning. Unfortunately, when it's coming to subsistence farming and so on, they can't pasteurize the milk, and then unfortunately they can then ingest. But this is why we need to educate them and teach them, what's the signs of an infected udder, what you need to do there.
To prevent it rather. And I think also what's important to bear in mind is the fact that, pasteurization is a reduction process. So I mean, pasteurized milk, we could still have a problem, in terms of that process, because it's not sterilization of the milk. And so I think we also do need to appreciate that there are some limitations to the process of pasteurization, and we need to rather encourage, as you said, the farmers to produce the milk in the correct way from the word go. And another interesting point that you made, sorry?
If milk is pasteurized, normal pasteurization at about 70, 72 degrees, or ultra high temperature, your little box milk or the UHT milk. I think if it says it on the outside, it is like that. And I know that dairy standards, they sample milk from time to time from the shelves, and it gets tested. And then if there's no report according to my knowledge, I haven't seen any reports that there was a problem in milk that's available on the shelf. Drinking unpasteurized milk, it could be a problem, but pasteurized milk, one can use it without testing. Safe to use.
Confidence. Yes, absolutely. Okay, last question, and that just relates to the drug issue. And I think you made a very interesting point, is that there could be drugs, but they're not necessarily registered for mastitis.
Yeah, unfortunately, you know, as I said, if you look at the different drug groups that you do get, you know, you get your penicillins or your beta-lactams, you know, that's your normal penicillins. Some of the products that you can buy over the counter still do contain beta-lactams, cloxacillin as an example. So it can end up, you know, in another. But with the residue test that we do, we can test for beta-lactams, we can test for your sulfurs, and we can test for your tetracyclines. Unfortunately, some of the other products, you know, there's products that are now very, very modern products that they use as an example in feedlots. What we call, it's falling in the group macrolides. But the macrolide is not, you're not allowed to use it in a lactating animal. So it's against the law, and it's also not going to do, you know, it's a very good product in a feedlot to treat and to counter pneumonia. But you can't use it in you know, and think you're going to cure the problem now by using this. And I think what we also need to take that responsibility as a dairy farmer. You know, I'm not going to use a product off label. In other words, it's not registered as such, or then, you know, to use a product in another format. I once had a person called me and said, listen, there was a product with a zero milk withdrawal that was available that you can inject the cow with, but then they went and they put it directly into the teat. And then they picked it up, and then they called us and say, when I was still at the pharmaceutical company, you know, we've got antibiotic in the milk, and your product said that there's a zero milk withdrawal. But I said to them, you can't put it directly into the teat. You know, it's not against the law.
So I think there's just both angles, you know, and I'm glad you highlighted that. You can have a product, the product may be registered, but it's still not registered for the particular condition. So we have to take both of those into account. Dr. Chris, thank you so much for your time. It's been really, really interesting. I've learned a lot more about mastitis, and we really appreciate your time today, and we look forward to the next webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda. Thank you to everybody.
Okay. Thank you to the Dairy Standard Agency for having us today. We do appreciate the opportunity to share this information. I know there's lots of questions from all of you coming through. Thanks to Dr. Chris. Thank you very much for that. And you will find the recording as well as the PDF of Dr. Van Dijk's presentation on our website. And if there are any other queries, we will be directing you through to Jacqueline so she can assist you from the DSA's perspective. Have a good Wednesday, everybody. Chat to you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you.